Who are you?
I am the face of Racing Rant, but otherwise known as the Perler, Marc Lambourne. I've been around forever, hence all the grey hairs and Professor appellations. But finally getting amongst a serious tournament that we're keen to crack on and get ahead in because there's obviously a lot at stake.
Just getting back to talk about yourself a little bit, I guess, why do you bet?
Look, betting for me is a measure of success. So I came into this game going, I want to solve this puzzle, and a major ingredient in solving the puzzle is how successful you are, and realistically, the only way of measuring success is by betting. So I'm not the sort of desperate adrenaline junkie style gambler. If I don't win, then I haven't been successful. So there are other metrics that I sort of soothe myself with, but ultimately, if you don't win, then you can't consider yourself a success in this game.
Who would you say your biggest mentor would be? Obviously, you've got the nickname and you've been coined Perler for your pearls of wisdom, and I guess it's more of like an evolutionary thing, as you've probably just touched upon there. Like, you're forever learning, but I guess where did it start for you? That process, that learning process?
It started back in the 80s. I was a young kid hanging around the racetrack, clarking, doing my best. And I was adopted by one of the leading rails bookies, who I just happened to make acquaintance with on a field trip to Newcastle, the old Newcastle double, which we've seen morph into that horrific thing that happened last Friday. But back in 1987, I met Peter Todd, and within months he was inviting me to form some prices for him, or to provide him with some prices. Here he is, this leading bookie. Dom Byrne has just given it away, and so he decides that he's going to put the prices up first. And I had lots of interest in doing this job, but I actually had no experience. He was just basically taking the work experience kid on and saying, I'm going to train you. And so for the next 11 years, we just talked how to do markets and how to bet off those markets and trade as a bookie every day of every week. So I was very fortunate. I found someone who I held in huge esteem, and he, being the sort of teacher type, decided that he wanted to impart his wisdom and share his wisdom and run off me. And I was, that was golden.
And how would you say you guys approach the form in those early sort of formative years of your learning?
Based on ideas. So we were looking for various ideas that the market would respond to, both positive and negative. So it was he had a deep background in racing because his dad had been a long time bookie, but clearly he was a very smart man that had accumulated lots of ideas about the form over the course of his life, and he was bouncing them off me. And so I was sort of taking them away, working on them, polishing them. And, that stuff that you saw in the early days of the Punters show was very much an output that was based upon those learnings of mine back in the 80s, late 80s, early 90s.
And would you classify the Todd some of the smartest punters in Australia that you'd know back then, and who would be the smartest punters in this day and age?
It's such a curious term, smartest, because smart can simply be knowing where to find your information, or knowing that you don't know it, but you know where to go for it. So I've seen lots of canny punters. The best I ever saw was Gary Forrester. He was so screwed down, so clued in. He knew where to go and when to go to look for that ingredient that he needed. So I was pretty fearful of him through the 90s, and I've certainly had a relationship with him ongoing that is highly respectful, somewhat at a distance. He's a sharp operator. But I'd certainly say that smart punters are those punters that one, they know how to go about doing their trade, but secondly, they also are very brave at knowing when to pull the trigger and how and by how much. I mean, that's so you've got this situation where it's relatively easy to do the form, but it's quite hard to actually take that form and deploy it in a betting ring, whatever the betting ring looks like. It looked very differently once upon a time. Nowadays, it looks like, everyone knows what it looks like. But how do you actually deploy that information you've got? I think that is going to be a key feature of the battle that's ahead.
I like your answer there, and I guess you can see good tipsters, I guess, in the public domain. You hear about good tipsters that sort of hide behind or just don't want to be exposed at all. So I can definitely see where you're going with that. So do you think there's no one, I guess, source of truth, or there's no, Dr. Nick's the smartest, he's unlocked the puzzle, he's solved the whole game, he's clocked it, or there's no other one person out there that could be crowned the smartest punter in Australia? But I do take your point, and I understand there are smart punters that can go off and use information. I think that's really well articulated by yourself. But is it a Dr. Nick? Is it a Kingsley Bartholomew? Is there someone out there? Is there a god, I guess, that you can look up to, Jelko type thing?
Yeah, well, Jelko is an interesting beast because he came into the game as a man just looking for an edge, and his craft has been throughout his lifetime, or his punting lifetime, where do I find that edge? And I think Dr. Nick has come along and done it better. Whereas you've got a player like Kingsley who he's not as determined to find as creative an edge as the aforementioned, but he's got more bravado. You can see he's sitting there going, look, my edge is probably not that great, but it's, I'm smart enough to have some small edge, and I'm really going to give it a crack. The other guys, I think, they've definitely required a little more start, a little more in their favour. I think Kingsley's more of a player as far as the battle in the ring is concerned.
And what would you say the landscape's like for smart punters at the moment?
Look, the landscape could be a lot better. I mean, it needs a vibrant Betfair, and Betfair's had its hands tied by a number of things that have gone on in the last 10 to 15 years. Not being one of those big players, it's perhaps harder for me to comment on, how it looks for those. But the fact that they still exist in some form suggests that those of us that were forecasting doom and gloom for the entire joint were perhaps not quite right. We've seen this evolution of the wagering landscape, which has involved a number of very big corporates throwing a lot of weight and muscle into the landscape. They're really pushing themselves hard because there's a huge return in it for them, and that has meant that there is enough space. Not as much space as you would like, because it's still too restrictive, but there is some space for the smart punters to actually ply their trade, say.
Okay, so the smart punters have still got an avenue. What's the hardest thing about betting? Is it getting on? Is it getting those prices, or is it maintaining, I guess, your focus and the mental battle?
The hardest part is not getting sufficient reward for your IP. So we live in a landscape where it's just too easy to get stripped of that IP that you've crafted. Now I realize you're playing a game, and the game means that other participants can see you in that game in some form or another. But the fact is that I think that the way it's gone, it's been too easy for the people with IP in the game to get stripped of it for relatively little reward. So not being fairly respected for what they actually bring to that particular game that they're playing.
And would you say it's a privacy issue within the walls of sort of betting shops that would lead to that? And would higher MBLs, or what would be the change that would allow you to capitalise better as a smarter punter? I guess if it was a more tote or a more Betfair type model across the boards and it was a little more hidden, I guess punters would be able to get on for more. No one would know where the money was moving. Is that what you're getting at?
Look, to a degree, really, what I'm driving at is something that Richie Irvine brought up recently, which is the fact that there somehow it's permissible for corporates to have bots and not for punters. So technically, a punter displays his hand as soon as he has one bet, and given the state of the MBLs, that one bet is not necessarily very worthy. Given the task at hand.
That's a fair point. Do you ever get rattled or go on tilt? And if so, how do you handle it?
There are days where I feel stupid, as in I can feel that I'm not seeing it well, and my response tends to be withdraw. I'm more of a sort of a tortoise in that sense. It's the ignominy and shame because over most of my racing career, I've actually put my opinions out in public. So they're sort of there for all to see. I mean, obviously, I'm trading off those opinions so I can make judicious decisions along the way. And so whilst they're 9 a.m. opinions, and it's quite okay for me to say, well, look, that was a 9 a.m. opinion, so I don't have to be hung, drawn, and quartered. But at the same time, I'm still publicly out there and have been for a very, very long time. So I will find situations where after 2 or 3 races, I'm feeling somewhat shamefaced and am not inclined to chase. I'm more inclined to say, I want to get to the end of this and start again.
Okay. But I guess as a punter yourself, you always can change. But I guess, there'd be that pressure or that sense of responsibility that you've given out. I guess the 9 a.m. set, circumstances have changed, so all of a sudden there'd be, I guess, an added layer of guilt, which could, I guess, muddy the waters for your own betting. And then I guess you just need contact, I guess, with people throughout the day to say, hey, look, there's a bias here or there's something happening here, and update them. And I guess that's probably the benefit of the racing rant, chat room. But I guess if you weren't a tipster and you just, what would you be, I guess, outside the wagering hours? Was there something that appealed to you there, or can you always see yourself as just being a punter or working in behind a bookmaker or something like that? What would it be?
So you're talking about the racing game, or is there another game that I'd like to play?
Well, exactly, or life in general.
Look, I would love to be a cricket commentator. I just, cricket has been my game since before racing. And the funny thing is that you build up all this expertise in one game, and you go, oh, I'd really fancy a go at somewhere else, like Formula One driving or something like that. And you quickly brought down to earth because you anticipate that you will somehow bring your stature that you've earned somewhere else to deploy in this other field. And it's interesting how what a newbie you can appear in a field that you're interested in, but you don't have the deep depth of expertise that you do in your main gig.
Well, maybe the closest thing you're going to get is this 4-man comp, this 2020 style betathon that we're going to roll out on Turnbull and Epsom Day, and then have the pinnacle, of course, on Caulfield Cup or the Everest. We're going to go climbing that day. Let's talk about that comp. We've done the barrier draw. John Walter first up. It's a funny way that the duck race sort of fell. I'm not sure if you tuned in to watch it, but you drawing John Walter was an interesting one. You're both, I guess, New South Wales specialists. Angle finders. You're a little bit outside the box, probably more so away from fame.
We're both squares, really, is what you're saying.
How do you feel about drawing John? I guess you got to beat 2 out of the other 3 in the tournament. But would you rather meet him in the grand final? Are you nervous about round 1?
I I'm nervous about the contest, not so much who I'm competing against, and I don't think I don't know Anthony very well. I know Johnny McLeod well enough to have some sense of where he's at. I think all of the players, I'm sure, have their strengths and weaknesses. Jay Walter, he's a shrewd beast. So I'm not taking him lightly, put it that way.
A few people on Twitter, when we put a poll out, or we put some market odds up, thought you should be overwhelming favourite, not just for the head-to-head matchup in week 1, but to take out the entire competition. Thoughts?
That was very kind of them. I think my reputation perhaps precedes me. The longevity I have as I suppose an analyst might have installed me as favourite. Of course, John McLeod has a deep bookmaking background. And Anthony Don, well, he's basically fashioning himself as the new man on the block. So, I can see why history might have installed me, favourite in the contest. But I think it's more dynamic than that, the foursome. So we'll wait and see. I'm sure that the in-play betting could be more interesting.
It's going to be a funny one if you get Anthony Don, who, when we recorded this same interview, he mentioned that you were one of the first persons and one of his big mentors. So it'd be good if Master took on Apprentice in the final. And I guess everyone, cheers for the Cinderella story. So I'm tipping there'd be a lot of public support for Donny, not just from his fame, but the underdog in general.
He's the everyman, right? So if when you sit at the feet of wisdom or whatever, you're generally rooting for the new sensei, the up and coming sensei. The whole point of my commitment to racing in the way that I have styled myself is basically to offer something, a hub that people can become engaged by. And, I point to my brother-in-law, Gordo, as being, one of the prime examples of someone that, I knew and hung around with for a long time, but he was just one of those weekend warriors that didn't seem to have much clue. But he became engaged by the hub that was Punter's show, and he clearly took some ideas away and had a look at them himself, and he's been ever onward and upward since. So that's the whole point of the exercise from my point of view, that you engage people by being very passionate about a thing. They look at you and they go, wow, like you've really got a lot of energy and effort to offer here. I'm attracted by some of the stuff you're talking about. I want to learn. And, I'm here not just to teach, because I'm learning from the people that I've come in contact with as well. But I'm here to be part of a learning community because I love it, and I know that lots of other people love it as well.
I guess maybe it sounds like you got the puzzle and you got the racing game down pat, but maybe the tournament style and I guess applying your mastery to try and figure out how to play these tournaments. You've had experience in the past with Punters Club Banks, Liz Morkoff's Harbour in the past. You had a little battle with us against Bet Doctor. You've got experience. How do you think you're going to handle? Are you going to handle the bank any differently to, I guess, how you've handled past punters clubs, or will it be more cat and mouse because you only have to beat one person across the line, which is John Walter week 1?
Look, I'm basically seeking to deliver a good result for the those that have contributed to the finance. So it's not about for me, it's not about beating John. It's about delivering the best result for the bank. I certainly hope that means that I progress to the grand final. But I'm certainly looking to say, look, here is a bank. This is how I'm going to deploy it on the day. And because it's a one-day bank, you don't necessarily tackle it in the way that you would any given day, because any given day you're only dealing with a small portion of your bank. So certainly, some of the very, very conservative style of ideas that you might deploy to your own bank won't necessarily apply to these. But you know, they will speak to the way that I approach the game in some way.
What about the game of golf? The first prize is a trip to Augusta. How do you feel about going over to America to watch the biggest tournament in the world?
It's on everyone's bucket list, isn't it? Even, you know, I'm not a golf aficionado, as in a watcher of the game from afar, but I'm a bloody keen golfer that doesn't get to play much these days. But you know, it'll happen again. It's one of those exquisite games that when you look at the apex of it is hard not to be enthused and excited and thrilled by. So, you know, game on, bring it on. We'll get there.
Can you hit the ball?
Yeah, I'll have a lovely 7-iron, Scoot. 7-iron and a putter. That'll take me a long way.